Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is SubLBC here doing another installment of What It Takes to Be a Grower. And it's been a very long time since we've done an update to this series. And the reasons are obvious. We are incredibly busy and things have been somewhat intensified recently because of a lot of just personal things that have been going on, not only in my life, but also in the lives of the girls. We have some that are out of the country, some that are just dealing with things, and we're in the process of training. It's just been a total juggling of affairs. And, this happens obviously with the growth of the business and the expansion of the nursery is, create a little bit of chaos, but things are getting a little bit more under control. And I hope that I will be able to, at least somewhat normalize the rate of videos that I do. It used to be like a daily thing, or at least every other day. Now it's, we're lucky to get 2 videos out a week at this point. But I have been kind of holding back a little bit to kind of focus my thoughts more on principal photography for the film. And, that's been going on. Obviously, now that we've got the second vertical garden up and running, we've been moving forward with that. And my weekend is going to be kind of dedicated to doing that, since the Niners aren't going to be playing this Sunday. They already crushed the Rams on Thursday night. So, in any case, guys, getting back on to the point of today's video. So, before we go forward with what I'm going to talk about today, first, we'll make it, kind of clear what this video series is all about, or historically what it's been about. And that is to essentially talk about, abstract theories and thoughts about things that you can do to prepare yourself to become a successful grower. What it takes, the true foundations, the fundamentals, things that you can do that may not even necessarily have anything to do with growing, but can end up paying dividends. We've talked about the kind of relationships you should procure, especially the ones that you should not. We've glanced a little bit about the subject of race. Also talked about some of the earlier jobs, which tend to give you some insightful experience, or I should say that'll give you kind of a little bit of an intuitive advantage when it comes to doing build outs versus someone who's just kind of going from a straight cubicle office job with no real hands-on experience. It really helps to be more of a construction-minded person. Especially when it comes to experience with tools and how to use them and how to identify them and just to do very basic implementations. But in today's video, we're going to kind of shift the focus more on the future, right, of what it's going to take. And this is really going to be a video talking about those that are already in the game and what we can expect from the future. So I've been doing a lot of research, guys, over the course of the last week. Not really that much, I don't really have that much time, but to really put together a subject that I wanted to make for this video, and that is to talk about the new generation, the millennial generation that's, coming of age now, and, we're starting to see them, attempt anyways to enter the workforce. And I have my own insight on this, although it be very anecdotal, and I will reflect on this a little bit, but I am going to be talking about, the generation as a whole, some of the facts about it, how it relates to cannabis and how it's going to translate for those that are already in the industry, because it is an ever-changing world, but with accurate predictions of the future can really put those in a pretty unique position. So let's first talk about the climate, the state of affairs. There's been obviously a lot of complaining from growers with the fall of weed prices continuously falling over the course of the last couple of years. And we've seen this with clones, we've seen this with herbs, and there are some people that are very dissatisfied with the state of affairs. I wouldn't say that it's pushed a lot of the true professionals out. I don't think it's nearly that bad. But I did want to at least add some insight as to why, well, not really as to why this is happening, but why we shouldn't worry so much about this. And, looking at the cannabis business, from a purely entrepreneurial standpoint, you got to understand that, anyone that gets into their own business generally takes a lot of investment and time before that business, becomes actually really successful and profitable. And to express it in a true timeline fashion, it's been said many times, and this can be demonstrated, pretty realistically, that when you do actually want to start your own business, you can expect to invest like 5 years of your time into that business before it actually makes like enough money to where you're actually just doing nothing but that business. It starts as a project, you build it up. You probably still have to keep part-time work, full-time work probably more than likely, probably have to go into a lot of debt, right? And at the 5-year mark is when you actually are like, all right, you know, we're finally doing this good enough where I can just quit my fucking day job and this is it. And then over the course of the next 5 years is when the business actually starts to create some real value, right? I mean, it is a true asset. You know, it not only will probably create income for you, but it might even have its own reserve capital. You know, it has several employees potentially. It becomes a real network, a real contributor to the overall economy. And, you know, that contribution that it makes to the economy gives it value. That's a 10-year cycle, right? That's the average business cycle, regardless of whatever it is you start up. And that's, of course, taking the debt you probably have to incur into account and, you know, how that actually translates, you know, to your asset versus your liabilities. But when you compare that to a cannabis-based business, I mean, you know, given me or given myself as an example, very little capital started up, a little bit of luck, but it didn't have to be that way. But I go from a situation to where it's like, you know, borderline poverty, essentially about to just lose it. And starting with a couple 600 watt lights and, you know, partnering up with somebody else on a 4,000 watt room, within the course of not even 5 years, I mean, we started all the new grows with the 4,000 watt and the little, you know, dual 600. Jesus, late 2009, that garden got started up. So we are not even at the 5-year mark yet of this particular business. And it's considerable asset worth at this point. I don't know what I would sell my business for, but, you know, if it was all encompassing, you know, with the YouTube following, the Facebook, the media presence, as well as the production facilities, the employees, I mean, what do you guys think it's worth? $500,000, maybe even $1 million? It's worth a lot. You know what I'm saying? It's more than just an income for myself. It is an income for other people. It is a considerable asset. And all this was done within 5 years. Now, I do consider myself somewhat of an above average individual, but, you know, being realistic, most people that have the balls and the true potential to be entrepreneurs generally are above average individuals. So, you know, even with the state of affairs being as it is, you are still going to be way ahead of the normal timeline for starting up a business, even in today's economic climate. So, you know, right off the bat, you know, growers shouldn't bitch too much. And remember, there are methods out there where the productivity can be radically increased, which will definitely turn the tides in your favor. And we're obviously working on that with the whole vertical thing. So, moving on to other things that are going to kind of make it easy for cannabis to remain profitable in the long term, simply is the fact that it's taking place in the United States. Majority of all the cannabis grown in the world is grown right here in the U.S. There's a lot of reasons for that, although I think the primary reason ultimately comes down to resources. For outdoors, you know, there's just literally limitless acreage that can be used to grow pot. Certainly more than what the consumers could ever hope to want, you know, if it had to be produced at that level, and it doesn't. I mean, cannabis, I believe, is the #1 cash crop in the U.S., but as a percentage of acreage is like a fraction thereof. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't require a huge amount to produce for the market that exists for it. Now, for the indoor market, the United States obviously has huge advantages. Not only are we the #1 consumer market for all the products that are used to create cannabis, but a lot of the nutrient companies are produced right here, you know, and the consumer base is also right here. And the cost of energy is the cheapest, more or less, in the United States. Cost of living, of course, is incredibly high, but again, it's offset by all of these other factors. You also have to understand that the United States is never, you know, in the foreseeable future, going to really have to face any import competition. You know what I'm saying? There's no other country that could produce cannabis cheaper than we can because of the costs associated with the energy. You know, we get energy so cheap, and that's not going to change with the United States petrodollar status. So there are some people that make arguments for corporations possibly coming in and squeezing out small growers. And I do believe that with legalization, you know, becoming more and more of a thing across the nation, I do believe that the corporate presence is going to increase, but I don't necessarily believe it's going to affect the small-time growers the way that a lot of people think that it will. And I don't have to really give too many examples, but just to make it really simple and to make this video, to help with brevity, big-time corporations and small mom-and-pop businesses have been able to exist shoulder to shoulder for a very long time in the United States, and it does continue on today. Real quick examples. One that obviously has the closest relationship with cannabis would be the wine industry. We have huge wine industry, or corporate-run wineries, essentially, right, that produce for huge distributors like Bevmo and the stuff that goes into the large-scale grocery stores. But right down the street, you have little tiny mom-and-pop, possibly family-owned, or very, very small corporate-scale wineries that maybe sell to only a very small chain of independently owned restaurants, or maybe work with large-scale clientele in some way, shape, or form. But the point is that they're all able to exist side by side. Everyone is able to find their niche, and cannabis, has that cultural following that is going to always have the want for the ultra high grade that can never be replicated cheaply. And with more examples, guys, again, with the food industry is a really great example. You have huge corporate chains like the Denny's, the IHOPs of the world, even some that are maybe more high quality food, like, I don't know, Outback Steakhouse or whatever the fuck, right? But right next door you have independently owned mom and pop restaurants that do just fine. Corporations are going to come with legalization. This is definitely the case, but they are never going to be able to attain the kind of monopolies and control that people think that it will. Because understand, the only way that monopolies really truly can exist is with government intervention, right? Now, one form of monopolization could be they could just make it illegal for small-time growers to do their thing while making it legal for these big corporates to do their thing. But that's not going to work with cannabis, and the reason why is because it's already been illegal across the board, and that hasn't stopped the guerrilla growers from basically powering this industry, and it has. This is not there are not big corporate conglomerates, centers of power that run this thing. It's all done by a huge sprawling mess of independents that are all just working their niches to make this thing run. So obviously a government intervention by making it illegal for them and legal for big corporations is simply not going to work. The infrastructure has already been able to operate under this illegal stigma continuously already. So that leaves the only other option, which is pure government subsidy in the form of capital injection, right? Where they're basically just giving money to specific companies that they favor. We see this obviously happen with government purchases of pharmaceutical drugs and shady crony capitalism contracts that we have with auto industries and all this. But pharmaceutical obviously is an example where everyone kind of goes crazy, like, oh my God, they're just going to take over the whole thing. But I hate to say it, guys, but I think it's going to be a very long time before any politician is going to put a stamp of approval on any kind of legislation that involves giving taxpayer money to cannabis. You know what I'm saying? It's just political suicide, and I think that that's going to be the case for a while. I also don't think that the federal government is going to release their hold of things in the form of, basically taking cannabis off the Schedule 1A. It's simply not going to happen. There was a news article that came out not too long ago where Eric Holder basically says, flip-flopping again, guys, it's a fucking liar, obviously, but saying that they're just going to now allow states to kind of self-govern. And and it kind of dawned on me, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew this already, is that what is the point of getting rid of the law if you can just selectively enforce it? The federal government, is a power-hungry beast. It's like a monster that just constantly wants to feed on power. And the fact that it has cannabis on this list of these narcotics, right, that they can throw us in jail for, gives them power. And there's no reason to just give that power away by taking the drug off if they can just selectively enforce it. And this is clearly what we're seeing from the federal government. And combined with the fact that it might be, again, politically unwise to make a push to get rid of it, and we don't see anyone in Congress or the Senate really making an active push for it, It's probably going to stay there forever, which is probably going to prevent the large corporations from, creating this climate that people are so afraid of with legalization from actually happening. But like I said, unless we actually see the government injecting capital into, some cannabis sect of the business, we really have nothing to fear from monopoly. Corporations will come, they will do their thing, and the guerrilla growers will do just fine. You can't forget about the advantages that you have as the guerrilla grower. The fact that you don't have, the crazy advertising costs. You don't have, CEOs and all this overhead that big companies have to deal with. You can cohabitate with your gardens. You can be more price competitive than anybody. And remember, like I said, no import competition. And you're going to have the cheapest energy on the planet. So that's really shaping up, I think, to make things great for people that are entering the business. Now, I want to finish off the video with what I think is probably something that is really not talked about at all, as it has to do with cannabis. And to be honest, guys, a lot of the things that I talk about on this channel are probably not talked about at all on any other cannabis channels. There's just a lot of talk about this herb, that herb, I like this, I don't like this, here's where you can get it, I'm the best grower in the world, or I'm trying to be really great, or I'm just trying to share information. I mean, you get it all out there, but there's not really too many high-level discussions about the future of the industry, where it's going and why. So another really interesting thing that I think is going to shape the industry, and I think is a really great thing for people that are already in it right now, and that is the up and coming millennial generation and how they're going to play into this whole thing. Now, I don't want to get into too much anecdotal stuff. I work with people primarily from that generation every day of the week. I have my opinions about them, and I don't want to get into too much of that, only because it's really not anyone's business, and it's really not terribly relevant to the discussion. I mean, we're talking about, the largest generation in American history at roughly 80 million people or so, I believe, is what the millennials are. We're talking about a lot of people. But there are some really disturbing trends that are taking place with this generation. But, things may be bad, but doesn't mean it's bad for everybody. So when I'm talking about the millennials, who am I talking about here? Okay, so we're essentially talking about people that are born between the years of about 1983, 1985 to about 1995 to 2000-ish, right? People that are essentially coming into the workforce right now. The entitled narcissistic generation, as they've been described accurately, I might add. What is this generation really all about? Well, I'll tell you what it is not about. And it is not about taking risks. It is about essentially just holding on to shelter. You know what I'm saying? And for the first time in history, we're really dealing with a generation that is going to do worse than any other generation in previous American history. And when I talk about generations, I really only want to focus on from like World War II on. So from the Great Generation to the baby boomers to the Gen Xers and then to the millennials. Now, a strange thing kind of happened with the Gen Xers, which is my generation. And that is, we were more or less just divided. We were kind of spliced, with the younger half, or at least some of us, identifying more with millennials, whereas some of us, generally the older, definitely sided with and behaved more like the baby boomers. And it shouldn't be very difficult for you guys watching my videos to find out what I am. I've clearly self-identified more with the baby boomers. More of the cool, calm, controlled, ultra-competitive, pro-capitalist, laissez-faire, free market boomer. I mean, that is really my personality. The Gen Xers, just like the baby boomers, were both generations that were born out of anger, right? Rebellious generations. Millennials, though, unfortunately, were kind of born more out of angst and more of, irony and self-loathing. And, we've had generations in the past, especially ones like the silent generation and, around the times of like, the Great Depression, World War I era, where there were just horrendous conditions, where there was really no safe havens for anybody. But through the suffering, you gain the strength and the character to create the next generation, which will hopefully outdo the last. It was a continuing trend until we get to today. Now we're basically focusing on a generation that, will not even get out of the house and actually start becoming real adults until they're about 30 years old. And, even in the past, when things were really, really bad, whether it be there were no options for younger people or whatever, it was sink or swim, and I think that Gen X was probably the real first generation to kind of have a choice. We could have stayed at home longer, but we were a little bit too angry, a little bit too unconventional. And keep in mind, our generation was really the first to kind of deal with this whole breaking down of the family thing. Our parents were getting divorced a lot more. We'd really never seen this before. And this anger just caused us just to get the fuck out. And we crammed ourselves into small apartments, worked shit jobs. Some were still able to get high educations, some not. But, this is probably the only real thing that separates Gen X from the millennials, is that we, for the most part, even though we were labeled a slacker generation, we did get out there and, we did contribute. And there are some that believe that Gen Xers are the ones that are going to, quietly bring everything back together, because the baby boomers are eventually going to die. And the millennials are just getting off to too late of a start. If you really don't understand what it means to be an adult by the time that you're age 30, that means you're really not going to start seeing successes in life until you are really like 50 years old. You know what I'm saying? That's a pretty horrible thing to kind of come to terms with. I mean, taking myself as an example, and, honestly, most people in life, the 30s are really when you really kick ass as a dude. You're older, sure. You're not in your 20s anymore. You're kind of working your way towards your 40s, but you're not quite 40 yet. And in today's modern world, the 30s are kind of when you're in the prime of your life. And, right now, guys, that's how I feel. I feel that I am literally in the prime of my life. I don't think that I've, accomplished the most that I hope to yet, but the foundations are there, and even the foundations could be completely stripped away, but the knowledge and the experience is never going to go away. And I could easily, I believe at this point, re-replicate what I've done with this, what it is I've created in a much, much shorter time than what it took me to do this go round. But there's no way that I could have done that without the first decade, from like 20 years old to 30 years old, where, I might have worked a lot of shitty jobs and, just really never had a lot of opportunity. But, I learn along the way. And as the opportunities present themselves, I take advantage of them every time. I'm a risk taker. Gen Xers overall are risk takers. That's why we fucked things up kind of so bad. A lot of people blame the baby boomers for a lot of the horrible shit that's going on, because they were in a lot of positions of authority, during the whole tech bubble bursting and the whole economic meltdown that we had, in lieu of the real estate crisis. But people shouldn't forget that Gen Xers were very instrumental and complicit in bringing all this shit to where we are. Putting all the blame on the baby boomers isn't fair. I mean, we were there too, not only buying properties, but obviously working in the industry, and pushing this crap on people. The Gen X, at the sales end of it, and even at the middle and some upper level management, Gen Xers were definitely there. And, it's kind of that just foolhardy, risk-taking, portion of us that kind of caused these problems. But with the millennials, we don't even see that, We're basically dealing with a generation that is completely caught up in, cyber celebrity, pseudo, fame, kind of really self-indulgent, the most narcissistic generation that we've ever had. And also, I think the least morally centered. They really have no fucking idea what good is, or bad, at least in the ways that previous generations have understood these things. And they literally think it's just totally okay to not do anything because there's just nothing to do anyways. The whole world's fucked up, and there's always this, self-loathing, very ironic, satirical take on themselves. There's no seriousness. There's no edge. And remember, guys, I'm talking about an entire generation here, right? And we do have to, get somewhat stereotypical and look at it as objectively as we can. But the numbers are clear. This generation is going to be the first to actually be predicted, for many reasons, economic, social, political, whatever, to do worse than any other generation before it. Now, as far as cannabis is concerned, however, this means really only one thing, and that is we have very little competition to face from this generation. Who are cannabis growers right now? Well, guys, cannabis growers right now are dominated by Gen X, okay? The entire cannabis industry, more or less as a whole, is completely dominated by Gen Xers. We own a majority of the dispensaries, although there are still baby boomers, old schoolers that run that aspect. But when it comes to the actual production, the growing itself, wow. I mean, Gen X absolutely runs the shit. Gen X males, I would say probably account for greater than 95%. I'd say very close to that. Baby boomers are a bit too old at this point. I've talked about this in previous videos. The baby boomers that we kind of idolize are mostly retired. And the ones that do still grow, probably doing a majority of the outdoor stuff still. But even them are a lot of Gen Xers are doing outdoor stuff too, big time. And maybe 95% is a little rough. I think that 95% would apply more towards the indoor stuff. Indoor growing is more, it requires more technological aptitude. I think that a majority of baby boomers have been somewhat left behind. And, I have a unique insight when it comes to the who's who of growing is, because I am a very public face. I talk to a lot of growers, not only from the ones that I meet on YouTube, but, I am selling clones to some of the largest, indoor growing operations or collection thereof that are going on, here in Southern California, which just so happens to be one of the largest production hotspots in the world, And trust me, guys, when I tell you, Gen X runs the fucking show, and we have absolutely no competition to face from the millennials. I do work with some younger cats from time to time, but they're all very small scale. Not even really doing the entry-level stuff very much. They're just kind of doing at-home grows, and all the big cats are my brothers. People that are the exact same age as me, or a little bit older, or a little bit younger, but they're all over 30. And I know that there are some, like I said earlier, that kind of identify more with the millennials that are kind of over 30 or right about the 30-year-old range. And it doesn't it doesn't encompass everybody, but this is a generation that is going to get out at age 30 and start becoming adults. This is when they're going to want to start growing. Now, as it turns out, this is also the time that I started growing. But you can't just, it is so hard, guys, to just come out and to try to not only grow successfully, but to also become a galvanized adult at the same time. And I've talked about this in previous videos. The whole thing with how getting involved with girls and fucking the pitfalls of getting into long-term relationships, especially if they involve children. The fact of the matter is that you're very young. Everyone around you is very young. You guys are all making stupid-ass decisions all the time, putting your lives at risk, some to the point of even literally dying, And there's this whole phase that you've got to go through where you watch your friends destroy themselves, and you really start to understand that you have to change your mentality and you have to make these lifestyle changes that involve a lot of sacrifice if you want to be successful in this world, whether it be cannabis or otherwise. And it takes people sometimes years. It took me a whole fucking decade, to realize that my whole life was spent going in the wrong direction. And this was, at a point where, I'd been very successful in the past going in these directions. All my previous careers, the things that I've done, I'm like, wow, I'm kind of going in, the right direction. But the whole time I wasn't. And it's because I didn't have the knowledge that I have now, which took me the better part of 15 or 16 years to gain. And thank God I started it young. You know, thank God I got out when I was 18 years old, got out on my own, free from my parents. They're not giving me any money. You know, if I'm going to hack it, I'm going to hack it on my own. I'm going to do it, you know, on my own terms. If I make mistakes, they're going to be my mistakes. I'm going to learn from them. And, you know, again, I was not particularly great. It took me 15 years just to figure out what it is that I wanted to do in life. And even now, I struggle with what it is that I'm doing. And I always take solace in the fact that I don't really have a choice. You know what I'm saying? There's no other options for me. You know, I've gone so far in this direction that I'm going to play it out, you know, to its conclusion, whatever that may be. But to gain that kind of maturity and to make those sacrifices took years. And, you know, let's face it, you know, we're dealing with a generation that's, you know, spent just 10 years. I mean, it has really, really huge negative impacts on human development when you were a child and you just continue being a child well into adulthood, you know, and for the you know, the guys, I think they might potentially have a better time of it, but for the girls, I mean, Jesus, you know, you're going to be blowing by your baby fever days, literally starting life when you're already past your prime. It's going to have huge effects on society, and you know, with this generation being as it is, it just means that we're going to have to work that much harder and to stay in this industry if we're going to want to continue its growth and prosperity. I mean, it's all going to fall on us to carry the burden. But that's great in a sense, guys, because the burden is there. You know, at least we know the industry is going to continue to function. And although we're not going to face much competition from millennials in the productivity aspect of things, make no mistake, they're going to be very, very, very healthy consumers, because their generation is like, literally, let's smoke pot and do nothing. You know, let's play GTA 5 till our heart's content. Let's just wait for something good to happen. But it's just simply not going to. And by the time it, you know, dawns on them that they're going to have to go out and make their own life, it'll be too late. You know, we would have already had such a huge stranglehold. And it's going to be clear, guys, that, you know, Gen X is going to be running this show realistically for another 2 decades, man. I mean, I'm going to be growing herb until I'm almost 60 years old. But man, you know, consider how great it's going to be for those who have put in the time, you know, because businesses, man, they become incredibly valuable when they continue to grow and expand over time. And, you know, I have really no desire in letting up. You know, I've talked about, you know, I'm kind of capped out on how much I'm willing to do as a single person. I've got a lot of, you know, work on my plate or, you know, to deal with right now. But if legalization over the course of a couple decades does eventually lead to corporatization and we can start really growing this thing out, then, you know, the people that are involved in the industry right now are in a very unique position to really make something of themselves in the coming decades. So my real, you know, message to all you guys out there, especially the ones that are, you know, just kind of starting out, or, you know, maybe just starting to get a feel for this and they're really happy and they want to continue on knowing that this is what they want to do, don't worry, guys. We are going to do just fine. We're going to make a ton of fucking money. And I think that, you know, for those that are out there that are on the fence that don't know if they want to do this, get in, you know, and get in now. And if you are one of those millennials, you know, remember, you're not going to be facing very much competition from those around you. You're going to be kind of a unique youngster with, you know, a lot of need, a lot of demand. The demand, I think, is going to continue to increase, but the production side is going to be somewhat lacking. So, you know, don't worry about it, guys. I know there's some negative talk out there about how things might end up being really shitty, but, you know, after really looking into it, you know, with the economy, my prospects, and how things are going to be, you know, in the long term, I think we're going to be just fine. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Definitely talked a lot more than I think that I needed to, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all very soon.